All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's August 19th, 2020, and my name is Eric Osterman. I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse, and we're a DevOps accelerator. What that means is that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and then showing them the ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in to participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to the Office Hours channel, as well as follow up with an email so you can share it with your team. So with that said, let's get this started. Got a few pretty cool announcements to make from last week. So one is just reiterating something that I brought up last week. It's not something new, but if you're a contractor or freelancer, I'd like to know, go to suiteops.com/hire and register. Especially if you've been a frequent contributor to Cloud Posse modules, I'd like to know. I do get quite a lot of inbound leads and I'd like to pay it forward. So please go ahead and go to suiteops.com/hire and register. All right, it's come up a few times that we use OpsGenie and that we just recently open sourced our OpsGenie module. Well, we open sourced something new for OpsGenie this past week that I like, and I'd like to say it's a composite of the other modules for OpsGenie, but it's actually not. So the new submodule in the OpsGenie incident management module, this one is nice because it's designed to take a YAML configuration of the desired state of your OpsGenie configuration and make it so. So this way, Terraform, the module, handles all the business logic of how to do it, but the YAML configuration abstracts away the description of what that looks like. So if you look through here, you'll see an example of one way you can do it. You don't have to have a file called this. The module accepts a map. So how you get the map into the module is up to you. One good way of doing that is using the YAML decode method. Then yeah, you can define all your alert policies, your API integrations, your escalations, and all of that in a config file, expose that to developers to update or teams, and even use OPA or conf test and set up policies around that. So any questions on the config module? I'll send that into the Slack team here. I forgot to connect here to suiteops.slack.com. Yeah, and if you're listening and you haven't yet joined our Slack team, definitely go ahead and go there. To register for Slack, go to slack.cloudposse.com. Again, that's slack.cloudposse.com. And maybe it's time I silence again all these join notifications. That did get a little bit annoying while I was recording the intro there. But let's see here. So here's a link to the config module I was just talking about. Then let's see. So, okay, 0.13. This has been more work than I'd like to admit. And I'd like to share with everyone things that we've learned from this, that we're making changes to how we're running our Terraform modules, and things that you guys might benefit from. So the biggest problem that we've experienced upgrading to 0.13 was when we upgraded, well, let's take a step back. So 0.11 to 0.12, that was a big deal. I mean, Terraform entered the leagues of almost being a bona fide language, and the HCL2 was not backwards compatible with HCL1, and it was a pain in the butt. The other thing, though, is that Cloud Posse had no integration tests on all our 0.11 compatible modules. Our criteria for migrating a module to 0.12 to HCL2 was that we had to have Terra tests. And that's good. That meant that all of our modules had working, complete examples, complete being a relative term, but something that allowed us at least to instantiate and tear down that module. So that's good. But what happens with this are a few problems, and this is what the price we paid. So I think the easiest thing is just to go in and show you what we're doing to upgrade our modules to 0.13 compatibility. So like if we look at the RDS module, one of the things we did was update the versions here. So this is an example of our first approach for updated version pinning to support 0.13 and 0.12. But this is also the root of all of our problems and challenges, is that for the Terraform core version, we are pinning the upper bound on that. And this is a real problem when we are trying to go from from two minor releases in Terraform, from 0.12 to 0.13, 0.13 to 0.14 in the in the 12-month time frame here. So what we're actually doing now is doing an about face on that. And an example would be, I think if I look at the code pipeline module here, is for the core version, we are going to now only do a lower bound pinning on the core version. And this is going to allow us more easily to mass upgrade all of our modules and run tests, assuming there's not going to be HCL3. I don't yet proclaim this is a solution that's going to work for every possible scenario, but it would have definitely saved us a lot of pain here. So the good thing is that we're pinning everywhere. The bad thing is our pinning was so strict that with our examples, so if I go into our examples here, this we were not able to run our tests and stuff because, like, in order to run the code pipeline, I need to have a VPC, and the VPC had pinning to 0.12. And then the subnets needed to work also with 0.13, so we had to upgrade that module. The problem is all of our tests for the subnet module depend on creating a VPC first. So we had all of these cycles everywhere that just made this pinning situation a nightmare. We have gone through, and if you look at the pull request history for all of our modules, it's going to look something like this. Multiple passes across all of our modules in bulk, automated, with much help from Matt Gowie and Pepe and a few of our other core contributors from the open source community. So we applied those, and we've just systematically gone through and updated these things. So what we learned is there are a lot of cycles in our ecosystem of modules due to pinning. Any, before I continue, any observations, questions, recommendations so far?
Yeah, hey, Robert here. I got one,
Robert.
Too. Yeah, so maybe a solution for, like pinning the upper bound might be, like if there's a major update. I know Terraform is using zerover right now, but if they switch to Simver in the future, or semantic versioning.
They are using semantic versioning. Zero is a special case of semantic versioning.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could make that case.
In semver.org, actually, but yeah. But yeah, okay. If they started using majors, yeah, maybe some of that would be easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
know. Just a thought. Yeah.
I am what's the word I'm looking for? I am sympathetic to them not using it because as soon as you start using major releases, you are committing to some greater degree of stability. While when the major is zero, so what I'm referring to is a escape hatch in Semver that is frequently not known, and that is that when the major is 0, yeah, when the major is 0, anything may change at any time. So, hey, we're honest about it. Anything may change in the modules at any time because, hey, if even the tool we're using, Terraform, is at 0, how could we possibly say that we are not at 0, right? It's like we are built on the tools that we use. So if some of my philosophy, or our philosophy, Cloud Posse's philosophy, is under community resources. So if you go to Cloud Posse docs, look, these docs are like most documentation, pretty far behind, but really far behind. But the community resources is recently updated, has some of these things. So that's been recently updated, like our FAQ here on how we release, when do we cut new releases, what is our Semver strategy, and we point that stuff out. So I'm just going to share that just in case that's interesting for any of you regular contributors. So also related to this migration is well, there's a big pain when first of all, you know, we have to use chat ops because we can't automatically run our tests on forks because of the security implications of exposing our testing keys. So we use chat ops. So that means every time we open one of these PRs, we have to run /test all, wait for those tests to complete. And we got to get an approval because we want to protect master. So that adds a little bit of a burden. Then we got to merge, and then we got to cut a release. So chipping away at the manual pieces here, we have added a workflow now to many of our, this is going to be rolled out to all of our modules, but we will, but it's only on some right now, is auto release. So there's a pretty cool project called Release Drafter. It's an open source project and a GitHub workflow that we have this kickoff on merge to master. And then it uses the configuration now in auto-release.yaml where, look, if the PR is labeled, has any of these labels, it's automatically going to be a patch release. We default to minor releases. This has been our standard Semver strategy. If we don't know what to do, just make it a minor. Remember, it's 0, 0 dot. And then it'll automatically create the template for the release based on the pull request and cut a release. So if I go like to ECS code pipeline now, if I go to releases, you'll see that the new, this was an automatic release here. And, oh, so here's what happened. Andre on my team okay, so there's two problems with this auto release thing, okay? One is you got to make sure everybody knows about it. So he didn't know about it yet, so he cut his own release. Auto release kicked off after that, created a new release. These are identical, no changes. The other problem when you're doing automatic releasing is when you don't have it on a repo, but you're now in the habit of always having your releases cut for you automatically, you might forget to release. So that's a bit of procedural stuff I got to communicate now to my team. All right. So any questions about the auto releasing thing before I go on?
Yeah, just curious. It sounds like, just curious in terms of the workflow that you have internally. We're on the team I'm on, we're tackling very similar issues around releases amongst a bunch of process related stuff. And I was just curious, do you guys have like a template that you, like when you onboard a developer and it's like, here you go. If you're creating a new repo, a new module, go through these 5 steps and set up.
Yeah, so these are SOPs, like standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, when we started a couple, we have not been around that long. We've been around since 2015. When I started, I had all those SOPs for everything. and they've kind of fallen far behind and not there yet. Then the other thing that's come up as we've grown this year as a team is one of the developers asked, so where's the employee welcome book, right? And yeah, we should have that now. So these are some growing pains I think I need to introduce to your point.
Just curious, I'm tackling very similar problems right now. We're working with a bunch of different languages, want to standardize releases. This is a really cool tool. I've never seen it before.
My approach would be a light on the documentation, and then moving as much of that into conventions, well, like GitHub Actions as you can, and template repos. So if I go so one thing for Terraform modules we're doing is now we have, well, let me show you an example. So remember I said that Ops Genie module? Well, let's see how that developer set it up. Well, this was generated from Cloud Posse Terraform example repo. And that happens because if I go to Cloud Posse and go to new, I can select the template repository. So if you want to standardize your repos across languages and frameworks or patterns, that's one good way to start.
Yeah, I have not heard about that. We're using Bitbucket right now. This is probably a reason to use GitHub.
Yeah, well, Bitbucket was definitely leaving GitHub in the dust for a while. GitHub was just on life support, it felt like, for many years. But after Microsoft bought them, dude, have you seen their roadmap for GitHub? It's impressive, and a lot of features are dropping now.
Yeah, no, I've used GitHub for years. I got thrown into the Bitbucket world because that's what we've had at this company, and it's just that switching cost. But you got plugins like the one that you just showed me, plus this, and it's just like Bitbucket's always lagging on that feature set. Or at least the community support.
Bitbucket is, I'm just recently working with a client who's on Bitbucket, and it's killing me from a number of aspects. It just feels bad to be in that environment when I know GitHub so well and love the tooling there. Yeah, I don't think it's really even considered an apples to apples comparison anymore.
At least you're not on code commit though.
Yeah, no, that's legitimate.
Could be worse.
I had a client ask for that, and we pushed back pretty hard, or I did.
I think it's worth it. Yeah. Do we have any GitLabbers? I want to give fair representation about why you hate GitHub. Okay, go for it, Andrew.
I don't hate GitHub, but if I want it on premise, I got to pay out the nose for it.
Yeah. That's good.
GitLab has been awesome, and their upgrades have always been great and feature rich.
Yeah. That is, one of the things I love on GitLab is hierarchical projects. I hate having hundreds of repos in a flat namespace. So it just, you can associate them with teams, and I get it, and you can have tags, I get it, but I've never been sold by tagging as a alternative to hierarchy. I think it's a nice complement to it.
I was going to mention teams and if that did the trick for you, but obviously you're messing with teams. I can see you at 15 right there.
Yeah, we got a lot of teams, and I do associate repositories, and that's helpful. But honestly, for me, it's I want to go to repositories, and I want this to be hierarchical here for everyone off the bat. I want to have my Terraform module somewhere. I want to have our tools somewhere. I want to have our forks somewhere else. I don't want it all just in this flat namespace.
Yeah,
that might be a cool. That might be a cool browser extension to work on. It would be to make it hierarchical based on tags or something.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody has their GitHub browser extension idea. I've had 5 in the past, and I've worked on 2, and it's just such a time sink.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one I've used, which I really liked, was ZenHub.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, so ZenHub gives you more modern project management capabilities, right? On top of
like Kanban or Scrum.
Yeah. No, it's certainly clever ways of doing it. I have to get my head around this thing that I need to add something to my browser in order to get the experience. But hey, if it solves a problem, why not? This is a personal limiting belief, not a technical one. So, okay, so that's my update on 0.13. Here's what's left. What we're going to do next steps with this is we still have a couple modules that are using constructs of 0.12 that do not work with 0.13. Off the top of my head, like providers are not allowed to be in modules anymore. Well, they are, but you can never invoke that module twice if that is the case. And it's been an anti-pattern for some time. So we're going to move that stuff out. That affects like our code build, our GitHub triggers module. It did affect our ops genie, but we updated that one. It affects how providers are defined. So the syntax for that has changed. It's backwards compatible only in 0.12.29. And then lastly, what we're going to do as the final PR for this is we are going to run the Terraform 0.13 upgrade command, like there's one for 0.12, and change the minimum core version to 0.13 and push that out across the board. Flip our tests to only test for 0.13 against master. And then for any backwards compatibility, we create a branch called 0.12/master, which will be the branching off point of the last release against 0.12, and every other merge into that will be a release under the last release of that version. So they'll all be patch releases. We won't do more feature updates for 0.12 modules. I expect this to play out over the course of the next 1 to 2 weeks, but we've seen a large decrease in the number of PRs and requests for 0.13. So I think we've quelled the most burning problems for most people. All right. Any last things on 0.13 before I move on?
I wonder about before we do the like 0.13 final, if getting something to automate commenting like our chat ops test all as soon as a PR is up, you know, that's Pepe's, I'm sure his fingers are hurting. And I'm sure you too, like you're working until 5 a.m. most nights. I feel like that might be an easy, like low-hanging fruit that we could knock out.
So I think, yeah, there are two ways. It's a further discussion. We could automate the comment for /test all, or we could have a separate set of tests that run for branches. The challenge is our branch protections, and we need to make sure, well, whatever happens is we need to make sure that the status checks have the identical names. And I'm thinking aloud a little bit more.
Yeah, you lost me there.
Yeah. So yeah, so basically the way the chat ops happens is they're dispatch events, and they actually run against a totally separate repository. They run against the actions repo, right?
I know that part.
Yeah.
Definitely poked my head in there, but then
yeah, so for those, we kind of did a little primer on this before, but if I go to Cloud Posse actions, the test command here, this is the dispatched action. You'll see the trigger is this synthetic kind of trigger name of test command. And that is caused by another action running in each individual repo. So that each individual repo dispatches a pull request event to this repo and it runs. But because this actually then runs against the master branch, we have to do all these, we have to do all our status updates manually. We can't rely on any of the built-in CICD status updates to the API that GitHub Actions does. And the problem is if we change the trigger type, if we change this from a trigger from dispatch, it changes also how we get the data from the payload. It's no longer a client payload, it's coming from a different type of event. So having automatic, I think the right way of doing this, I guess this is my way of saying, I think the right way of doing this is that we should have certain tests run on branches We should have certain tests run on dispatch. And the unfortunate thing is that I would have to significantly refactor how this works to support both models and keeping it dry. Anyways, I didn't mean to, dude, it's so easy to derail me on this stuff.
Didn't know that was that complicated though. Yeah, sorry for stopping you there.
But yeah, I do. So here's my master plan for what we're going to do at Cloud Posse. We're going to have automatic module updates across all of our modules. We're going to automatically run the tests against those updates. We're going to automatically merge, or we're going to automatically approve pull requests from automation that pass tests. And then we're going to automatically merge upon those tests completing. So we have a really well-oiled machine, and we'll probably do this on a regular cadence, maybe not daily so that there's not constant flux, but maybe if we did this on a routine, like we scheduled this first of every month, that this kicks off across our entire module infrastructure and updates everything. So we'll kind of know, like, or we'll do quarterly. I don't know what that is, but my concern is if we have things updating too frequently, could introduce stability, because tests are only as good as the tests, and updating for the sake of updating isn't always a requirement. Any thoughts on that point, on my grand vision for our modules? All right, one thumbs up at least. All right. Anybody paying attention to the KubeCon, Cloud Native Con going on in Europe right now? Have any interesting announcements they want to share? Hey, Vlad.
A lot of TechCon stuff around.
Yeah, AWS finally announced, what was it? Template.
Yes.
Launch templates for managed nodes, which is awesome. But they still don't support Spot, which is a blocker for me. I get it, it's a complex API, la-di-da-di-da, but at least there's progress. They also announced how they want to be at most 100 days behind the Kubernetes mainline, which is interesting. 100 days.
Yeah, 3 months.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And
how's GKE doing behind mainline?
Look, GKE is doing shitty. I got bit by that with EKS with Kubernetes 1.12, I think.
Okay.
So people were yelling at AWS, where I do most of my work, dude, release support for 1.12. Yeah. AWS very politely posted on that, well, on an AWS employee, posted on that issue. Yeah, it hasn't passed our testing. Sorry, we're waiting for another release with a bunch of other fixes. It's gonna take a while. GKE released it, corrupted customer clusters, and had to roll it back.
Wow.
And that's a consistent thing that's happening.
Wow, that's the first I heard. We don't do anything with GKE right now. So I've just used it as a user, but not for production infrastructure. So as a user, it feels pretty nice, but I didn't know about those gotchas. So that's nice that Amazon has some tests for that.
Yeah. GKE is saying you should test it and stuff like that, but like, come on, I expect my cloud provider to do exhaustive testing.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where, just harkening back to the zero major version, like that's what Kubernetes really should be on, because it's not as if their minor bumps are actually minor. You know, it sounds like they're pretty considerable. So then again, they have the operator pattern, which just like is going to, you know, you have an operator, it's working against an API that's like pretty internal. The fact that that's going to break things is just probably inherent in the way that whole system is built.
Yeah, that we've been bit by that, like 115 to 116 and V1 beta 1 being now officially V1. Yeah. So other announcements related to that. Backwards compatibility.
Yeah. They do keep that for a while. They also announced the ACK, AWS controllers for Kubernetes.
AWS
controllers for Kubernetes. You put an S3 bucket, you put it in a YAML, a CRD, and it gets created. I am sure I have a link somewhere. Yeah, that's it. That's the first URL. But hold on, there's a blog post somewhere. It's nice. It's the operator. So AWS had the service broker for Kubernetes. That was creating CloudFormation, submitting it to the CloudFormation console. It was doing applies. It was very convoluted and super hard to debug. And they announced the controller a while ago. It was in preview. They played with it around. They were really open with the community. Like they had multiple design RFCs in public, which is awesome. And now they released it. It's still alpha-ish. Like it's in preview.
And I believe they deprecated their the service broker and the other one that they had. Right?
I didn't see that in the repo.
We graduated ACs, so you can, okay. I forget, they had two different projects, basically that ran CloudFormation behind the scene with CRDs, but I'm trying to see what the CRD looks like for this.
I posted in the chat a link to the blog post that has an example for an ECR repo.
Oh, cool. Hold on.
Again, developer preview. Docs are not ideal.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll go to production next week.
Woo. So we're gonna get bit 1.16 style again with 1.19, aren't we? With ingresses.
Oh, tell me.
Ingress is graduating from beta to stable.
Yeah.
And the API and the spec is changing. So instead of service name and service port, it's now service.name and service.port.
Yeesh. Yeesh. Well, hopefully you're using monochart, then it'll be easy. Just one chart to update and change.
You need to do a blog post on monochart. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I do need to do that. Man, that's been the proverbial I need to do thing for years now. But yeah, I totally do. All right, so this is kind repository. Oh, interesting. So you're pointing to a repo and with a repo containing the CRDs?
Oh, that CRD is creating the ECR repo with the name.
Oh, this is creating it. Sorry, thank you. So this is a kind of Amazon ECR repo. Surprised they just call it register.
They want to version each CRD separately. If you look at API version, they have ECR.services.
Yeah. Okay.
They want some flexibility there, and it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I would have assumed that it would have reflected more like Amazon names, not a construct. But okay, I gotcha. Well, this is exciting. This is exciting. Really, it's interesting. Where this makes the most sense to me is where you have minimal backing services required to operate your services that you deploy. You need an IAM policy, possibly ECR, not sure, but yeah, ECR might make sense. But the URSA makes the most sense to me. You need to define the service account roles for your service, and then you can just deploy.
They said they are not going to support creating IAM roles because the security around that is crazy.
All right. Well.
Yeah. For me, it makes sense for like why I'm excited about this is self-bootstrapping clusters. Like I got a cluster, it starts up, it creates a bunch of resources for itself. It eventually, I know, subscribes to a queue. I know that's not even on the roadmap right now for them, but it would be fun.
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. That was definitely kind of an announcement I wanted to get out of this. So also related to what you meant, the first thing you mentioned there was also the ability, therefore, now to have custom AMIs with the managed node, managed node pools, and changing instance types. Cool. So next, so this is also related to, I believe it came out of this, which is really cool, is the hierarchical namespaces. Where this, for you, Andrew, this might be pretty sweet. It's piggybacking on namespaces in Kubernetes, creates a new CRD or a new resource type for hierarchical namespaces. And the names are still globally unique in the cluster, but they're logically associated with another namespace and inherit all the same policies and configuration. And then there's a new top level command so you can see what that tree looks like and see how these namespaces are related to teams.
There was a talk about that during KubeCon today.
Andre, did you, you saw the talk?
Yeah.
I have not. So anything you want to add?
No, it was just an introduction talk. It was given by Adrian Ludwin from Google, actually.
Okay.
It was a pretty nice talk, so I would advise you to give it a try, to have a look at that.
Are the recordings already available since this
I'm not sure, probably just on the platform, but probably I think they should put them onto YouTube soon. I guess.
Yeah. It's
gonna take a while for the recordings to go on YouTube because they have to do editing, which is apparently more complex now that it's all virtual. I imagine due to the Q&A. They should be available in the platform.
Yeah, it's available on the platform right now.
Yeah. Cool. Does this solve any pain points or use cases for anyone here?
Not yet, but actually it's an interesting tendency. Like to try to isolate everything within just one cluster. So it's just like, it was another talk related to the same thing actually, but the approach was a bit different. So other guys try to create another abstraction, like a virtual cluster within just physical one, and to do different kind of isolation.
I see. That's that sounds pretty cool to me, but it sounds a lot harder problem to solve. A virtual cluster within, so then that virtual cluster could have as many namespaces under it, and you could give each, but that cluster would still span the same node pools presumably and whatnot. All right.
So what I'm
go on.
What I'm confused about is, they've always said, Kubernetes isn't multi-tenant. Namespaces do not, work for multi-tenancy. Don't do that, blah, 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 whatever. But that's what they're trying to do here, right? Is they're trying to make it, better for multi-tenancy. So are they going away from that now?
Right? This is an add-on though, right? So it's not a core feature like a lot of the other, controllers are.
Okay.
So
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, this kind of feels like, if it would benefit you, you're not using it because you have some better, alternative already in place.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you don't, I mean, how many different rabbit holes do you have to go down before you find hierarchical namespaces? Like, this shit is already really complicated to figure out, and now it's like that's a whole nother level of complexity that you have to wrap your mind around to do.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. It doesn't immediately solve problems that we have. We're working with smaller teams, but I imagine enterprises. Any OpenShift experts here? I mean, OpenShift has some construct of this, I believe. I wonder how they did it. All right. So I think we covered all the announcements, and oh my God, we're all right. Hold on. I'm just going to stop there regardless because we got to get to some questions because that's usually what we spend most of our time on, not just announcements. All right. We had a quick question I think we can get to. This was from Matt Gowie. Any useful any examples of notes.txt in Helm charts that you actually appreciated that weren't just noise in the output of doing your Helm install and Helm upgrade? I don't know, just off the top of my head, the things that I've liked is when it output, this is more helpful for charts that you write for yourself. When it outputs like the service endpoint that you can go hit, when it outputs any, other derived information that would be helpful to using it. I'd like to output that in notes. I'll throw out one thing I've considered using notes for, but it's not what notes was for. I've considered using notes to output JSON that I can then use, in the proverbial Rube Goldberg apparatus of automating that with everything else. But I don't think that is a good pattern to go with, and don't recommend it.
I don't know what notes.txt is.
Oh, okay.
Quick overview.
Yeah, so a Helm chart has a particular layout, and one of those files in the scaffolding for a Helm chart is a file called notes.txt. And let's see if I have this notes.txt here, creating a notes.txt file. So a notes.txt is actually still a Go template, but it gets rendered and output as text when you run a Helm command to install or upgrade that chart. So it gives the operator some information about how to use this. Like, here's the endpoint to hit the admin URL, or here's how you can get the password for the service. Run this kubectl command. What I haven't liked is sometimes these kubectl commands are like 4 pages long, and pipes and things like that. It's like, okay, I'm going to copy and paste this whole thing just to get the password. I don't like it, but I get why they do it.
Thanks.
All right. So Matt, any follow-up question to that, or did you come up with your answer for that? Or maybe Matt had to drop off. He was on earlier. All right. So another question that was asked a couple weeks ago was a good one here. So hold on. Unfortunately, these always just ask me to open it in my Slack app, and I'm trying to do this in my browser. So the question was, like, if you were using the Terraform module to generate a key pair, and for those not using maybe Amazon, you always need to have a key pair associated with an EC2 instance, even if you never use it. So, so you generate this key pair. One option is, well, okay, generate the key pair and throw away the keys, and that's fine, right? This is supposed to be disposable infrastructure. The other option is what we've moved to is when we generate the key pair, instead we stick it in SSM. So rather than store that secret somewhere, share it in 1Password or whatnot, we store it in SSM so that it's consistently available anytime in the future if you need it. But you do need to protect that key. It is the master escape hatch to get to that EC2 instance. Your best bet is just not to have it at all. So yeah, this is that module. Yeah, I'll link that in office hours. Oops. Did that thing again. Also, during the calls, I tend to not read the office hours channel that much. So if you ask a question, thank you, but also like bring it to my attention because I often miss it. All right, so that's what to do about key pairs when you generate them with Terraform. Stick them in SSM is our current best practice. All right, any preference on using remote state? This was something that was asked a few weeks ago. I just wanted to circle back on it because I thought it was a good question. And the question first came across like, like a black and white answer, like, should we use this, or should we use this, or should we use this? And the options are basically, should we use remote state in Terraform? Should we use remote state in SSM? Should we use remote state in ASM? And where did that question go? Yeah, so opinion question. Does anyone have a preference on using remote state for looking up resources or data sources, which is a Terraform primitive for looking up data on a particular provider? So there are a lot of data sources for AWS, a lot of data sources for GKE. and doing that on runtime. So when should you use when should you use Terraform remote state and when should you use data sources? So the answer that we gave here was basically use SSM anytime you need to share settings across tool chains. Maybe it's your application needs that setting just as much as Terraform needs that setting, just as much as Helm file needs that setting. Then SSM is really a great choice as a config store for that. Remote state is really good between any Terraform modules that you manage or any Terraform projects that you are in full control over, but it's not that good if you're not in control over perhaps what created those resources. Maybe you had CFT generate a bunch of resources in Amazon. How do you get that? That's when you use data sources. So use data sources anywhere you don't have control over, but depend on those resources. Any thing someone would like to add to when to use remote state in Terraform?
Is there a instance where you would choose to use remote state if a data source would work? Like I kind of was thinking, you would use remote state if you really have no other option.
So,
but if a data source works, use that instead, because that's more, that's more mainstream.
I just realized in hearing you say it back to me, I heard a inconsistency in what I said. Technically, remote state is a data source. It's just a different kind of data source. It's a data source for looking up stuff from.
Right. No, a data source meaning if you need a VPC, you do data AWS VPC where the name equals foobar. That's a data source, right? A remote state is you're grabbing the output of a different Terraform state file that's living off somewhere. And so like your Terraform is going and looking at that other Terraform state to grab an output, which it can be sketchy. Like, you now have to have access to both states, and maybe you have your permissions in S3 set up so that you don't allow that because of security issues or something,
Yeah, I would say so. I would say if you're writing open source modules like we do, always use data lookups without Terraform remote state. And that's why we don't use remote state in, I think, any of our Terraform modules that you see on our public GitHub. However, we do use Terraform remote state extensively, and we use that between our various Terraform root modules that we've started calling more like projects. So across projects, we've used more remote state. I think the answer is it depends. It's a lot more terse often to just use a remote lookup, especially if there's other data you need, like ARNs maybe. But yeah, it's a fair question. I think anybody have comment on that, on Andrew's point there? That if you could just do it with a data source, why not use that instead of something proprietary with a Terraform state lookup?
So all I can say on that is the thing with the data sources, you're attempting to do a query. It works well with AWS, but not all data sources really support querying, as I'm finding with
That's true.
those.
That's a good point, yes.
And then the other thing is with the data sources, you are effectively, it kind of reeks of magic number. Because now you're having I have to know the name of what I'm looking for to get the ID. And it's like, well, where did you get that name?
Yeah.
And so with the outputs, it's much more programmatically defined. So it's like you're defining an API interface as opposed to an API interface through Amazon and hoping that that all works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the way I would use a data source, is if I'm laying down some infrastructure, but I'm not the one that controls the VPC laydown, because in my work, that's another department. And I know that kind of gets into silos and stuff, but they control the enclave, which is the VPC and the subnets and the NAT gateway and stuff. Yeah. I can lay down whatever I want inside that VPC, but I am not allowed to create a VPC. So, if I just provide the name of the VPC, I can use a data source to grab all the subnets in that VPC.
Yeah.
right?
This is exactly the third point here. You're used for things that you might not have control over. You don't have control over the VPC. You should use a data source for that.
But I mean, personally, I would still use a data source even if I was the one that created that VPC, because now I don't have a dependency on these two different Terraform projects.
Yeah, greater interoperability. Yeah. So those are the trade-offs. So I think the decision should be made case by case on what one's trying to solve on that. All right, so one question we had, this was also a little while ago, like there was an announcement, as many of you heard, that Amazon in partnership with HashiCorp has released CDK-TF for generating Terraform code using CDK. CDK supports a number of languages, but really TypeScript seems to be the one with the greatest amount of support. For those that don't know, HashiCorp or Terraform supports JSON natively out of the box. Instead of calling your file .tf, call it .tf.json, use the JSON structure in there, and it should just work. So exploiting that, they're using CDK-TF to generate Terraform code in JSON format and then running it. So the question asked was here, like, why, if I'm using CDK, do I even care about Terraform? Like, if I'm using CDK, I'll probably just use CDK primitives, is my reading into this. Let me extend that. So CDK is great if you're just using Amazon, but Terraform is so much more than Amazon. Terraform is GitHub. Terraform is Google Cloud. Terraform is OpsGenie, like our provider there. Terraform is, you know, Domino's Pizza. And if you want to bridge that gap, but you still want to keep a consistent source language for your developers, maybe this makes sense for you to use this generator. And all it does is generate JSON code that you still have to use Terraform, plan and apply, destroy, whatever, to provision. Now, we have an honored guest on the call, Robert here, who's been spending a great bit of time with CDK-TF, who has a more hands-on perspective. What did I oversimplify or miss, Rob?
Had to mute myself here. Okay. The biggest thing that I used with CDK, the CDK-TF, was being able to since I needed to use it for like generating S3 buckets, to keep it within Terraform, I used it so I can reuse like the Cloud Posse module. But it was much more, it started just from the fact that we don't have Terraform 13, or at least we didn't at that moment. And now it's like being able to for each on a module, but then it starts giving you other escape hatches. Like now you can do programmatic, I use it to programmatically read the JSON config file. So I'm not doing as much of the work that you would be to try and serialize into Terraform and then get it back out through your code. It gives you a much more programmatic interface to it, as opposed to a non-programmatic interface. And it's kind of like use the tool that best suits your ability. It is nice that once you run the synthesizer, it generates that, and then you are now able to just run it like normal Terraform. Though its naming convention is a little bit, it can get very ugly if you want to use like remote state or start querying it from other places.
Yeah. Programmatically generated code, right, is never as nice as the nuanced code that we write as humans often. So, and the other thing I just want to add on the CDK-TF thing is, I don't think these approaches are mutually exclusive either. And I think I often talk about layers 1 through 4. These are Cloud Posse conventions, layer 1 being your foundational infrastructure, layer 2 being your platform, layer 3 being your shared services, and layer 4 being your applications and what you care about. For layer 4, I think, give developers the option to use the tools that they understand and still, are good practices. So if developers want to use CDK for some last mile provisioning of infrastructure for their service, I would consider it. Kind of like using serverless. I don't think Terraform is the best option for serverless. I think the serverless framework is a much better option, and that generates CloudFormation. So a solution should support using CloudFormation on top of your foundational infrastructure. Kind of like what Andrew said. He's given a VPC. What Andrew does with it, Andrew should be able to decide. So I think the same is true with CDK, serverless, CDK-TM. All right, next question here. Is it insecure to set secrets via, this is a statement. It's insecure to set secrets via environment variables, so what should we do? And this is true. Like, you know, if we haven't been honest or transparent enough about it, like, look, we love 12-factor because 12-factor simplifies things from an application developer perspective, operations perspective, it all being the same interface, but creates problems from the SecOps perspective or the security perspective, because if this is running on shared infrastructure, you have access to the proc directory or can inspect process information. Environment variables are readily available to non-privileged users on the system. So 12-factor has been espousing this for years. How come we're using this for secrets? Well, path of least resistance. It's you know, different things. Different companies have different problems that they need to solve and different risk tolerances. You know, if you're a financial institution, maybe using environment variables is not copacetic. But if you're a WordPress blog and whatever, I don't know, maybe that's good enough. So this is where, like, basically any alternative is modifying your application to use whatever secrets stored directly, and then you're offloading that to the in-memory process space and binding and complicating local development. So what I love about environment variables is that we can use it in Docker Compose, we can use it deployed on ECS, we can deploy it to Kubernetes very easily as well, we can deploy it to Heroku. Everything does environment variables, and it's so easy to conceptualize. But once you say, we're gonna use ASM, okay, great. How are you gonna be doing that now in Docker Compose locally? It's gonna be much more complicated. So you end up straddling two things. So now developers are using environment variables locally, but you're deploying it using ASM, and you like trade-offs. Anything I oversimplified or recommendations for this?
I think it's a big difference.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's a big difference between being on some kind of multi-tenant platform versus being in like a container. You know, I mean, you know, doing secrets and environment variables on, you know, an Ubuntu server or whatever that multiple people can log into is different than, you know, using environment variables in a Kubernetes pod.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at a Kubernetes pod, you know, even if you have the secrets in a Kubernetes secret, the way you get them into the pod is you mount them as environment variables, usually.
Yeah, yeah. At the chagrin of the CISO. But yeah, that is true. And the core admins will have the ability, obviously, whoever can access the host OS of the Kubernetes cluster can see those. But security is about layers. You pick the layers you want. And I think Andrew makes a good point. If you're containerizing, it helps. It's not the end all be all. It's just one more layer that makes it hard. Any counter arguments or people?
Yeah, I actually spent quite a bit of time this week. We're working on a greenfield project at my company, and I'm a huge fan of 12-factor and environment variables. To your point, it just makes everything so easy. But then the concern around security was brought up, and now we're exploring this hybrid solution of using environment variables if that's the only option, and the alternative being using a mount within Kubernetes to actually have a file, so like a config-based file, and having something like console. I think it's like I believe it's called a sidecar for console, with like I believe another container within the pod that'll just update the config file and essentially restart the container, is my understanding. We haven't actually deployed it yet. We're barely getting our console server and Vault infrastructure spun up, but maybe in a couple weeks I'll have something to show you guys.
Word of caution on that approach. It seems beautiful. There was a conf D back in the day, Kelsey Hightower's project. used it, and it was this nice thing. Look, this information changes over here. Rebuild the configuration, send a SIG hub, and it short circuits all of these safety mechanisms in Kubernetes about how to deploy secrets, right? Because what you have in Kubernetes is you have to launch a new pod while the other one is running, and then that can pass or fail health checks, but at least your current pod is alive. And the problem when you automatically reload configs, like with a sidecar, is you're implementing, blackout, the blackout button for services. And how do you do that in a coordinated fashion? So, if that everything doesn't reload the config at the same time, and you get a burst of queued connections or something, I don't know.
I can appreciate that. We're working on better practices where when we make big changes, basically it's backwards compatible is the hope. I mean, obviously that might fall over, but rather than just, for example, rotating the secret for the same username, ideally provision a new username, deploy that change, and then do a rolling deployment is what I'd expect. But yeah. We haven't rolled this out, and I have a feeling we're going to miss some things just like that.
Did you were you on the call when I've talked about Reloader? Are you familiar with Reloader?
No.
Reloader is really awesome. It's a controller you deploy to the cluster, and you can then tell it which you use annotations to say which deployments it will monitor, or stateful sets, or replica sets, etc. And when the config map changes, it triggers a standard redeployment of those pods using whatever mechanism is there. So if you're using rolling updates, it'll use rolling updates.
Cool, thank you.
And so we've used this, like cert manager generates some keys. We need KIM to get those keys. So we have reloader reload KIM when the new keys are generated.
So you said you were going to put your secrets in files, right? And then mount them as files?
I believe it's like a secrets mount or something within Kubernetes. I have to double check. I think it's like, it's just a mount point. Like you...
as a file?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Okay. So my question is...
Yeah, sorry,
my question is, if you gain the ability to exfiltrate environment variables, what's the likelihood that you're not also going to be able to exfiltrate files?
That's a good question. To be honest, I don't have the answer on that.
So you're adding a whole layer of complexity for really nothing, right? I mean, if they can exfiltrate environment variables, they can probably exfiltrate files also, and so you've done all that work and you don't really gain any extra security.
That's a pretty good point. I'm gonna have to talk to my teammates about that one. I'm not probably sure. We did make an improvement to have the best of both worlds, being able to support both. At least with the plan that I've been shown, it's going to be using console, where apparently you can inject it as environment variables as well as a config file. But yeah, that's a really good point. I'm pretty confident you're right. Fortunately, on our current Kubernetes cluster, we have no SSH access. So even the issue around gaining access to the hosts doesn't really exist in our environment. But yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up.
If you can exec into a pod, you can get access to it.
Okay.
That's the normal, when I'm helping developers debug it, the first thing I'd have to do is exec into a pod and go cat the config file to see if the values got injected during the deployment.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I've done that.
Yeah.
A few times.
I mean, exec happens over 443. It doesn't happen over 22.
Yeah.
The file can still be encrypted, and you have the key pulled somewhere else.
But then it's just another layer.
How many turtles do you want to go down?
Right. It's like, okay, fine, your secrets are encrypted, but you've got to get your encryption key in there somehow, and so they can grab the encryption key and then decrypt your secrets. Like, it's just, it's layers all the way down.
So one thing I have done in the past, I wasn't happy with the solution, was you just check in an encrypted secret, like encrypt it with KMS, and then in memory have the application decrypt it using an IAM role or whatever. And I found that to be pretty good because it's all in memory, but
It's an
I just,
interesting solution. Yeah, you
like,
That breaks
a lot of
easy
choice.
local development. You want easy local development.
Yeah.
And yeah, putting stuff in Secrets Manager, KMS, whatever, is the safest way. You should definitely do that. But if your app is not cloud native, you're fucked. Excuse my language. Like,
yeah. If you're a
you can't do it.
self-respecting developer, you're not going to want to do it.
You can do it. Look how Lambdas do it. Lambdas get a bunch of secrets, a bunch of configs, get a bunch of things. But development for that is fundamentally different. If you want to fix your secrets, you've got to fix your development environment. You've got to mature your application. You've got to get into fancy stuff. You cannot just take a tiny bit.
That was a really succinct way of putting it. I like it. I like it.
And just to play devil's advocate on all of this, like even if you triple encrypt, you go through all this, if I can get into your pod, I have access to the web identity token. And if I know your role, I can assume it. I can then call KMS to decrypt your file, and I now have access to your values. Yeah. Or if I'm able to do a memory core dump on your application, I've now got your secrets. Like, I think the way of dealing with this is understanding that somebody is going to steal your credentials at some point. How do you limit them? Like, what is the zone of impact that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, or just realize that, as soon as someone gains, shell access to your pod, you've lost the game. Like, you have to protect, so that they don't ever get that access in the first place.
Yes. So I forget the term now, but basically you create all your containers from scratch with a single statically linked binary. And that's probably the most defensible position from a container. No bash. There's not even shell. There's not even ls. There's nothing. It is an empty container with a statically linked.
Tell that to Python developers.
Yeah, exactly. It's not
also, if you put your secrets in AWS Secrets Manager, you can rotate them, and you can rotate them super, super, super often. That's nice. Like, you got my key. Well, it's old. It's 5 minutes old. I've rotated it. I don't care about it. But again, your app needs to be able to do that often. There's a whole thing for it.
And where you're generating those, usually you have to have both online concurrently for some overlapping period. So yeah, like it gets messy quick. RDS, perfect use case. Other situations, Datadog, you're not going to be rotating your Datadog keys easily that way. All right, we are definitely over time today. Thank you everyone for participating in our session. We had a lot of interesting announcements. I picked up a lot as usual. Next steps from here, if you haven't already, head over to cloudposse.com/office hours to register for next week's session. We host these calls every week. If you liked what you heard today and you'd like some one-on-one time with me or my team, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz, and look forward to talking with you. Anyways, same place. See you all next week. Same place, same time. Take care.
Everyone.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.